Our guest this morning is Jaqueline Mutere. She is the founder and director of the Grace Agenda. Jaqueline, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
We've had a conversation with you before, but not on the hot seat.
Yes, I wasn't on the hot seat. It's not very hot right now, but let's see as we proceed.
For you, we're going to make it fun.
Thank you.
Just because it's you.
Thank you.
Because it's the 4th day of December.
Thank you.
You're the first guest this morning.
Thank you.
You know, kama vile username wanasema first 50 get some
Something.
Uyu. Pia wewe, because you're the first.
Okay.
You also get some good morning. City has the day's proverb. He says this week Proverbs will be from
Eritrea.
Eritrea.
The country of Eritrea.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Is it a republic?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Sometimes I wonder if it wasn't a republic, what would it be?
The monarchy.
Wikipedia describes it as, I will not say.
Okay.
A fly that does not listen often follows the corpse to the grave.
A fly that does not listen often follows the corpse to the grave.
Yes.
Jaqueline, how do you interpret this proverb?
If you're disobedient, you'll end up with the dead.
Straight shooting, fly from the hip, Haiti. This is it.
Okay.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
That one. Spot on.
Clear, right?
Absolutely.
If you're disobedient,
that's where you land. In fact, as we were saying, your end is clear.
Yes.
It isn't something that is in doubt.
That's a good one.
It is.
That's a good one. So, Jackie, you are the founder and director of the Grace Agenda.
Yes.
What's the Grace Agenda?
Grace Agenda is a community-based organization that was initiated as a response to the post-election violence of 2007-2008. A subject matter that people don't want to discuss, but thank you for giving me the opportunity again. So it was a response to the sexual violence, specifically the sexual violence that happened during that time, and specifically to those who conceived and had children from the violation, from the rape violation. And so after a personal experience, I thought after my healing process about the others that I had left behind, or others who were being left behind, and others whose voices were unable to be heard. And I thought of just initiating this discussion. And I brought together some, at that time there were about 4 ladies and their children who had conceived from the violation during the post-election violence. And we just started a discussion about what it would be like, because after I had gone through my healing process, well, yeah, I can say that. I realized that many of the women that I had left and many of those that I met during the counseling process were people that were that they needed more than just the counseling room and the counseling process. And so I made an effort to visit them in their homes. And when I did so, I visited one, who introduced me to the next, who introduced me to the next, who introduced me to the next. And finally, we were about 11 women with about 8 children, all of these that had been conceived from sexual violence during that time. And that's when I decided, I think, for us to have a bit more, an amplified voice, a cohesive voice, I thought it would be useful for us to just gather ourselves, first of all, with a singular voice. And that's how I initiated Grace Agenda. Yeah.
Grace, Jackie, I want us to be very, very clear of what we're talking about this morning. Post-election violence, 2007, 2008.
Absolutely.
What period are we talking about? December 2007?
We're talking about December 2007, crossover to January 2008.
January 2008.
Absolutely.
We all know what happened in the country.
Absolutely.
We know there was destruction of property.
Yeah.
There were people who were killed.
Loss of lives.
People who were maimed. And the matter of sexual violence doesn't really get talked about.
It doesn't feature prominently.
So let's talk about it clearly.
Yeah.
What do we mean when we say sexual violence?
For sexual
during
violence,
2007, 2008?
We mean rape. We mean penile castration. We mean sexual assault. We mean anything to do with your reproductive system that has been attacked or violated. That's what we mean by sexual violence of any sort. It could even have been verbal, because many women were intimidated verbally with the sexual innuendo, sexual words, intonations, that is sexual violence. But more specifically, we mean about actually the actual physical bodily harm that occurs, women and men. Yes.
And they were saying there were many that were reported during this time.
Not very many that were reported, but those cases that are known in the TJRC report and in the Waki Commission, I think they interviewed over 900 people. In the following one, in 2017, the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights recorded 201, but I think with other reports, other complementary reports from civil society organizations, the TJRC report comes to about 3,000 men, 2,500 men, 3,000 women. Yeah.
Who were affected as a result of this?
Who were raped.
Okay.
Who were raped during that time and during
That's
that period.
the word to use, basically.
Yeah, and I'm talking about things that you can go on the reports and discover and read for yourself. I'm not talking statistics that I made up for myself. I'm talking about statistics that were made by the Waki Commission and by extension the TJRC report. That's the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission report. Yeah.
Okay, so after the time period, obviously getting folks who then joined the Grace agenda, this was after this
much
after.
After.
It was after the rapes. It was after.
Absolutely. Almost 2 years later.
Yes.
Almost 2 years later, because most children were born June, July, September, end of October, September, October, November, November, December. That's when many of them had been. That's when many of the children were born. But then I went into hospital on November, and then I came out in January because of the sepsis that I had, acute sepsis.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
Jackie, now let's also be clear again.
Yeah,
you're giving your personal experience here.
My personal experience, which led to the birth of Grace Agenda.
What happened?
I was violated on January 16th. I was in a place where there was a bit of fracas. I used to live in Eastlands, the eastern part of Nairobi, and there was generally the estate is next to an informal settlement, and so there was a lot of violation during that time, and it was very, very rowdy and very, very violent. And so during that time, it was about 8 o'clock. There was curfew, if you remember. The curfew started at 6 o'clock, and so one of my neighbors, I had a friend of the voice of a neighbor came crying and saying that he was not really crying. He was banging and saying, "Open, open, open. The boys in blue are after me. Police were please nifungulie." Otherwise, I was going to be caught, because there were very dire consequences at that time had you been caught. And so he came in, and when I opened the gate, I realized that he had very bad intentions. And so we got into a scuffle, and then after the scuffle, then he violated me, and then after that, he left. And that was from about 8. He left at about 8:45.
Did you know him?
I know him very well.
You knew who he was? You had seen him before?
Absolutely. He was my neighbor's friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what happened after that? Was there a report at the police? Was there...
Well, 3 days or so, I stay in the house trying to recover. And then I go to the health center, because the first thing that I did was, first of all, the physical abuse, the slapping, the beating, the boxing, just the STIs, and soft tissue injuries. And then I did, because the health center is not very far from the police station, so I went to the police station. But at that time when I went to the police station, there was a lot of activity that was going on, and that was taking place, a lot of activity. And the officer asked me, "What do you want to report?" I said, "I want to actually report something that happened to me personally." He said, "Personally? Personally, what happened?" I said, "I wanted to report a rape." He asked me, "Did it happen to you?" I said, "Yes, it happened to me." He said, "Don't you see that there are more serious things that are taking place in this country?" So at that particular time when I'd gone to report, there was so much activity in the police station. They had been called for an activity. There was some riots, or there's some violence that they were going to quell in a certain area. So I guess that was much more important. Which brings it to the point which you've just said, that sexual violence is not really put on the table, and it's not really a priority for anybody. And so that is why I've made it my key agenda to bring it back to bring the conversation back to the center.
So what is the agenda?
The agenda is, first of all, Grace Agenda was born as a response to it. Grace means strength. It has got many definitions. It means resilience. It means strength. It means standing. It means passing through. So that is the agenda. The agenda was for grace. The agenda to stand. The agenda to speak. I didn't know all this at that time. Of course, some of these things you develop over time. But basically, it just came to me, and that's how it was born. And over time, I've realized that our main mission, first of all, is for self-agency. Self-agency meaning that many women should speak for themselves. Survivors should speak for themselves, and because we realized even during that time, during the commission time, and because of the voice of survivors being so muffled, usually CSOs, other civil society organizations, will speak for you. Other people who purport to be representing you will speak for you, but they'll either misrepresent you or say something that is not you, or not really, at times maybe share the extent and the depth and the scope of the violation on one's body. And so I thought that that is one of our key things, that there should be self-agency for people, for survivors to speak for themselves. And then apart from that is the capacity to speak for oneself, memorialization, for oneself, and then memorialization. That not a single story should be left untold.
Right.
And so those are our three key agendas.
Within the agenda, is there also within Grace agenda?
Yes.
So obviously, then this goes beyond post-election violence, or it goes beyond the violence around that election area.
Absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely.
So are you looking then at this violence that then is perpetuated against people, men and women, going forward? And in that, is there the aspect of actually still going, because you talked, and it must have been painful when you go to a police station where you seek refuge or you seek help and being given the answer that you were given. Is there the encouragement to continue going back to law enforcement to report some of these things?
Actually, I swear I'll never go back again.
You did?
Yeah. I swore I'd never go back to a police station again. And actually, I've never been to a police station until I came in the process of the work. We were supporting a girl in the areas of Mutere, and she had gone through a situation, not violation, but a domestic violence case. And we went to report at a police station, and when we went to the reporting desk, and she kind of like shied away, and I said, why are you shying? Why are you standing back? I'm just supporting you to report. It's not my report, it's your report.
It's you.
Yeah. And she said she smelt the man who had violated her. She smelt his sweat. She smelt the sweat of a policeman who had violated her from that police station. And we left.
Had she known it was a cop?
At that time, there was so much state activity within Mutere Valley that there was so much police, and there were so many police. They were, can I call them state agents? Yeah, that it's very possible he was the one. She knew he was the one. She smelt him. She didn't know his face. At that time, officers wear their caps up to here. They don't wear their jackets are covered their number. Even if you saw their number, you would be unable to even relate the number. It's a 7+ figure and number figure. You would never be able to remember it. And so she smelt him. And that's what encouraged me to participate in the police vetting report. If you remember, just post the TGRC, when the national dialogue started, some of the key asks were institutional reforms, and one of them was the police reforms.
Kavuludi.
And so Kavuludi. And so we participated in the police vetting reforms, and some of the things that came out were horrific about police officers violating women, men. I allow me to give 2 case scenarios, one that happened in Kibra and one happened in Mutere. In Kibra, it was a girl, and she was violated by a police officer, but it was in a corridor. So it's a 2-minute affair, 3-minute affair, and it's all over. And his friends are standing next to him, overseeing him so that he finishes. So it was in a corridor. So they just got her with, when they come in and they beat, they're banging doors. They come in very violently. That's one situation. The other situation was in Kibra. It was a family. Actually, it was a woman who had just given birth to a young lady, and they came in and they violated her in front of her daughter. And she had just had a cesarean section, and together with the young baby. I mean, it's horrific. And then finally, it's about a young boy actually within the same place, Kibra. He had, they were with his parents. And so the police came in, beat his parents, I think clobbered the father's head, and the father eventually died. And so the mother went up country, but he survived and he became a chokora after a while. But he, in the process of rehabilitation, was able to share his story with me. Yeah.
So you founded the Grace Agenda.
Absolutely.
Out of the sort of knowing your own story.
Yeah.
And then coming across other people who had gone through the same ordeal.
Yes.
So how many people does the Grace Agenda now cater for? Or who are members
Cater
of the Grace
for?
Agenda?
I don't know that we cater for, but we...
How many does you support? How many are
over 1,500, over 1,500 people, but the affiliate direct members were about 80, and we're talking about those in Mombasa. Remember, there were those who ran from the why am I forgetting the village? There's a village in Mombasa where they ran from, Likoni, yes, that were rescued in the church. I'm talking about those in Nairobi, and in Nairobi I'm talking about Mathare, Kibra, Mukuru, Ngomongo. There's one more area I'm forgetting, a bit in Kasarani. Yeah, anywhere where you find that there were specifically two tribes that were predominant, there was a lot of violations. And I say this because some say they've gone past it, but others have not passed it, because some of us live with the living reality of the impact of that violation, and that's the children. In Naivasha, there are those who came from the Eldoret camp, and they were settled at the Governor camp, which is currently called Governor. In Nakuru, there's Nakuru Salai that borders on both the Kalenjin side and the Kikuyu side. In Uasin Gishu, there's a strong Kikuyu presence there, of traders. Then there's Kericho, the tea estates, the women who are next to it borders on Kisii, and there's Kisumu, of course, and there was Muhoroni. We have a few there, and of course we have Busia, where there's a strong presence of Kikuyus. So at that time, if you remember, the country was really polarized between PNU and ODM, and so if you're either a Kikuyu or you're either a Luo, depending on which side you were and where it found you, that's what would have happened to you.
So how do you advocate on behalf of the people?
So this is why I speak about self-agency.
Right.
We build their capacity to enable them to speak for themselves. My situation is different from somebody else's situation. And so I would want you to say your story and to share your story in your own way. If you want to draw it, if you want to sing it, if you want to speak it, I build your capacity to enable you to speak for it. But apart from that, we get together to speak about reparations. We have annual conventions, we have campaigns that we share together. But then beyond that, we also do we participate in litigation. I think you must have heard of the public interest litigation 122 of 2013, where 8 survivors representing all of us went to court, and then in 2010 they got 4. There was a ruling to compensate 4, and 4 others were not compensated. So the case had to go back. Is back on appeal. Actually, we've done litigation. We've also done campaigns. We've presented petitions to the Senate, presented petitions to Parliament. We even wrote letters and presented them to the office of the President at that time when His Excellency Uhuru was in office. But it came to naught. But
talking of Uhuru, whatever became of the Restorative Justice Fund? Absolutely.
So that is one of the things that we normally speak about, and requested when we made a petition to Parliament and to the Senate, is we requested that the Justice Restoration Fund be initiated. Later on, we had rumors, but it's not right for me to speak about rumors on air.
Speak about rumors by all means.
Yeah, and we were told that some of that money actually went into the BBI process.
What's that fund?
It's called the Justice Restoration Fund. Yeah, and we wanted it to be operationalized. And the way we wanted it done, money cannot come out of government without a policy and a mechanism. And we developed that. There's something that is still exists in draft to date, because they needed it to be operationalized. And so I was part of the process, together with the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights, together with the Office of the Attorney General, together with the Department of Justice, and we developed that policy draft and presented it to the Senate and to the National Assembly. Then Honorable Gladys Boschole also presented one. her petition, her draft Justice Restoration Fund, but I think all these things are still in draft. But we did come up with also a mechanism.
2015 March is when the president
made in the State of the Nation address.
Yes, set aside
absolutely that money,
10 billion.
Yes,
that's when there was this attempted apology.
Yes,
which did not include anything to do with gender-based violence.
Absolutely. Actually, he just gave a very generalized, and it was a sort of a by the way. Oh, and by the way, for all the human rights violations, I'm sorry about that.
Yes.
And so
for
it was
myself
also
and for the government.
On behalf of myself and my government, I apologize. And it was not taken very well.
But in 2016, that budget year 2016-2017, they actually put aside 3.4 billion.
There was, it was a rolling, it was supposed to be rolling over a period of 3 years, 3.9, 3.9.
Treasury.
3.1,
Treasury ostensibly set aside that money.
Yes, and so those are the things that we're always campaigning for.
So what was lacking was the regulations on how then this fund was going to be operationalized.
Yes, and the regulations exist in draft. So it's a matter of passing them through Parliament, which is some of the campaigns that we consistently on.
Context, 2015 was at the height of the ICC trial.
Yes.
And the government needed to show that it's dealing with these matters locally,
It did.
Afterwards,
it did.
The matters.
The agency dissipated.
I would assume that the Grace Agenda affiliates with other like-minded organizations. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. We associate with very many partners and collaborate with very many others also. They're also like-minded. Not everyone takes reparations seriously. Okay, let me restart that. We collaborate a lot with people, many of those actors within the sexual and gender-based violence space, but not everybody wants the reparations agenda. It's kind of scary, because you're always coming up with against government or challenging government or saying things that government would rather not speak about or talk about. And this is actually what inspired me yet the more to initiate Grace Agenda, because there was a narrative of we have moved on. And we have moved on. They had moved on, but we lived with the
had people really moved on?
Nobody had moved on. They had moved on politically, not at all. There was a very unstable peace, and they had moved on, or maybe they just had moved on verbally, but physically very many people had not yet been moved on, hence the need to actually compensate, for example, the IDPs. But they moved on, and in terms of, they were literally moved from place A from point A to point B. They moved on to somewhere else. But for others who still live with the consequences, they have not moved on, and hence the continued seeking justice.
Should the discussion actually have revolved around moving on rather than finding a way in which we can face those demons and lay them to rest, having taken the appropriate steps that are necessary?
CT, your question is answered with the TJRC process.
Yes.
That was an attempt at seeking truth and getting justice, and then reconciling.
How did that work out?
That document, that report, was tabled before Parliament. Actually, it has never been tabled before Parliament. It went to Parliament. I don't know whether it was tabled, but first of all, one of the most disappointing things that happened was that 2 volumes were removed from that report.
Where did the volumes go to?
They were just expanded. They were just removed from the report. Wow. And those reports inside it, I say it with all confidence, it was implicating very many big people. I do not want to say the names of the big people because you can read the report for yourself, but those key.
Where is this report available?
It should be available on the Gazette website. It was gazetted, if I'm not wrong. It should be on the Parliament website. It should be on the Kenya National Commission website. Initially, it was not anywhere, but it was on the website of a professor who was one of the commissioners at the time, Professor Robert Sly, and he's a university professor in Canada. I forget the name of the university, but it was on their website because initially it was such a hot potato, nobody wanted to associate with it. Yeah. And so that is one of the ways in which Kenya would actually have moved on. And the entire report centered about seeking justice for the various people and sectors that had been violated, because in dealing with that, what happened in 2007 just exploded from something that was previously a lot of historical injustices. And so we went back to reviewing what had happened even from 1963. So that was the mandate of the TGRC report up till 2008 February. So all the violations that had happened during that time, Mau Mau, the Ndungu report was revisited, the land issues were revisited, the Likoni massacres, remember the ethnic cleansing in 1982, those were revisited, land clashes in the different areas, all these things were revisited and put into that report, including the TGRC report. So they wanted a holistic approach to dealing with the injustices that had happened from the past years and seeking a way of reconciling the communities, because that is what made polarized communities so much during that time. Okay. So, Siti, that is the answer to your question, the TGRC report.
Well, that question that I raises even more questions, because if those matters were never settled, it means we still have a ticking time bomb.
Absolutely. And so those things emerge every so often in different sectors with a lot more violence. And the reason I speak about sexual violence, because a lot of the times they speak about how the communities are polarized against each other, but the consequences of the polarization, nobody speaks about them. And where two cows, I'll use you're saying, where bulls fight, it is the grass that suffers.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So then I must ask, what is the thrust of all of this? Because there's so many things that have been said. There's so many declarations that have been made. We're talking about drawing a red line.
Yes.
And we're talking about towards the elimination of sexual violence in conflict.
Yeah.
But we also then, and I'm going to ask that question if you just give me a little bit. Because, so what then is the agenda? Are we talking about justice for victims? Or are we talking about the elimination of violence, knowing full well that sexual violence is used as a tool during conflict? It's like your machine gun. It's just that because now it involves human beings, that we will deal with it with a bit of a softer touch. But it's a tool that many people use to subdue, quote unquote, the enemy. It happens all over the world. It happened historically. It happens in modern conflict. Look around the world. What happened in Sierra Leone and Liberia? What happened in Rwanda? What happened in apartheid South Africa? Is that sexual violence was used to subdue people. Right? So if we're talking about justice for victims, we can look at compensation, things like that, raising children who came as a result of those conflicts. But we've talked about the elimination. What does that mean? That we're talking about stopping an action by a perpetrator, which for a lot of people is a decision that they've taken up here. So we can talk about the need to eliminate it, but what are we actually doing in terms of making sure that it actually stops when we know that it is a tool that is employed by very many to subdue? How can we do that? And I think for the how, it's been so difficult over the years because we've still not gotten the how. How do we actually stop this? So what exactly are we looking at here? Because we know it's so difficult to stop it, are we then dealing with justice for victims, or what are we looking at?
You've asked so many questions, I don't know which one to answer, but let me try answering it like this. The how is the constant visibility and the constant sharing and showing the impact of the violation on the lives of women and on the lives of survivors. The constant campaigns and government commitments is one thing. For example, Kenya has got a GBV policy and implementing it. And during the elections, these past elections, there was something called ESAP, the Elections Security Arrangement Program. It was called ESAP, and it was coordinated by so many players. It was a multi-stakeholder forum. The police, the IBC, ground coordinators, Nyumba Kumi, from the top down to the bottom, the NPS. And they tried doing that a little bit, and specifically the focus was on sexual violence. So I'll speak about Kenya. That's what it has done. In other nations, there are other initiatives that have been taking place, and they will do that. But then there's also the collective voice that we form, first of all, nationally, of course, through Grace Agenda and with other partners who are also stakeholders within the sexual violence fraternity, and we partner with them. And also, for example, raising our voices together with the likes of the National Victims and Survivors Network that exists. and it's a national network of all human rights violations that happen in Kenya. The Mau Mau are there. Evictees are there. The VOCA are there. VOCA is those ones who are accused in 82, the 82 Air Force. They're also part of it. So those are some of the ways that we try to do it. And eliminating, I don't know that you can really eliminate it. It's an ambitious word because you try to do something, but you, just as you said, you are pointing to somebody's head. When somebody purposes that they're going to do something, even if somebody wants to do politics during that time in 2007, it was designed to emasculate certain communities. To emasculate both the men and the women, because that way you gain power over them, and indeed you would. When you see how the different camps were, there was a camp in Kibra here that went to Roland's camp, the Jamhuri camp from Kibra there, because of the hotspot of communities that were there. So I don't know that. The efforts are continuous, but then there's the national voice, and there's also now the global voice, where you have just mentioned correctly many of the signatories. Kenya is a signatory to so many charters and UN organs, and even hence we went to the ICC. We are signatories to all these treaties and commitments that we've made globally. But then there's what we have: sexual violence survivors have come together in a global voice, with a global voice called SEMA. SEMA means speak. It's a Swahili word, and it was initiated by Dr. Mukwege, the doctor who is actually currently a presidential aspirant in the Congo. And he started off because he was treating so many women that had been violated sexually because of the Congo wars. And they were brutal wars of young girls and children. And he initiated something about speaking. So all the voices together, he initiated something where he would amplify the voices of survivors in his country. Then he realized that it was a common thing with any nation that is going through conflict. Sexual violence is a key issue, but hardly spoke about. So he brought the survivors together and he created SEMA. So that platform is what we use now to amplify voices. We take it to the global level, take it to the regional level. I took it to the African Commission recently through utilizing the Maputo Protocol, which Kenya is a signatory to. I've taken it to the United Nations, the UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly. I've taken it to The Hague during the Assembly of State Parties. I've taken the voice of Kenyan survivors to that platform. So it's a global thing.
Do you think that the amplification of voices then reduces the penchant for violence, or rather in conflict with sexual violence? Does it? And I ask that because, for example, when we talk about terrorism, we say that, talk about it, because what it does is that it reduces then the action of terrorists. Put it out, because one of the tools that they use is hiding it. Silence. They don't want people to talk about it. They want silence, and that's what actually allows terrorism to flourish. So if you amplify this voice of survivors, I call them victims before, I apologize, survivors of sexual violence, do we then now see that, or would we see, in whatever space, that it would be possible for you to say, well, look, because it's amplified, and like you say, very rarely does sexual violence take place in an open space. It's usually hidden. It's in an alley. It's, hidden away. If you amplify the voice, would you see, or would we imagine that we could see a space whereby, because we know you'll speak about it, you speak about your attacker as somebody that you know or that you knew, would we then imagine that it could be reduced because we amplify the voice?
If you amplify the voice, that means you develop agency. It removes the fear from other survivors. It helps them speak out. And when people speak out, there'll be much more traction. The voice will be much more traction, and you'll have to face it. The reason the amplification of voices is so important is because it makes somebody somewhere will have to listen. Because if I do and clap, 3, 4,
it's louder.
5, it becomes louder. It's just as simple as that. That's just the principle. And even if it might not stop you, but it will distract you, and it will make you know that there are consequences for this act. And if there are also punitive measures, especially through the courts, also that is another way that I will be able to stop and eliminate this.
Jackie, when you do this work, is there space where we can give consideration and I want to say this carefully, to the perpetrators as also having been violated.
Very possible. Very, very possible.
Because the sort of barbaric things you discuss and you talk about, the mind that creates such things usually is a violated mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very possible. About 5 years ago, we participated in a media campaign just like this during 16 days of activism, and one of the survivors went on to Ghetto FM at that time, and she shared her story of what had happened. And for some reason, some boy somewhere was listening to it, and he called into the studio and apologized to the girls that he did that during the post-election violence. But it was easy for him to be recruited simply because it is something that he had gone through himself. So for they're recruited. Boys are recruited to do these things. Goons are recruited. But for a goon to become a goon, you give only as good as you get. So you must have gotten it somewhere.
You have to have a mentor.
You have to have exactly,
and you have to be initiated.
Absolutely,
it's a process.
It's a process.
Yes.
And so for he sincerely apologized and realized the extent and the depth and the scope of the violation on the survivor's body and on their lives based on what he experienced, and he apologized, saying he did not think that what he was doing could have such far-reaching consequences. But he also apologized. He said because it was done to him, he also wanted to share his pain. He wanted to do it to somebody else. That was it.
I like the word. You see, the two words, violated, now shared the pain.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if we go back into history for Mau Mau, we come right up. Very many of these violators, if they're not dead, are alive and have never faces the consequences of what it is that they did. Ever. And if they haven't, that healing process will never really come about.
Do you know, Siti, allow me just to diverge a little bit, but not so much. Very recently, Gitu Akengeri launched his book, The Betrayal of the Mau Mau. And it was also the launch of the Mau Mau website. And the focus really is usually on the compensation.
Yes.
Which I think they discussed with his Excellency, the Royal King Charlie. Sorry.
His Majesty the King.
His Excellency, His Majesty the King.
His Royal Highness.
His Royal Highness.
His Majesty.
His Majesty.
His Majesty.
Jackie, His Majesty. And His Majesty came, and they had a discussion, and they made some awards. I'll appreciate if you stop laughing a bit. You're distracting me.
No.
Okay. Anyway, this is a serious matter. I said so. The focus was on the compensation to the men, the compensation to the fight, but really the highlight of what the women went through is never really spoken about. And after I spoke, and I shared about what Grace Agenda stands for, and why the voice of women, and why the voice of rape, and why the voice of sexual violence should be highlighted in the website, and even in Gitu Kahengeri's book, is simply because there's no voice left. It was not given the visibility and the punch that it should have been given, because it's a forgotten story, and hence the reason why I memorialize a lot, because a woman's story is going to be lost, because it'll look like they'll acknowledge, yes, the women fought, they did this, they cooked food, they did what, but nobody knows the actual consequences.
It isn't avoided. No.
Sexual violence?
No, I'm going to explain what I mean by it isn't avoided.
Yes.
When somebody refuses to acknowledge something, it's not that they don't know it, because refusal is an action. So they just dig it deeper and further and further and further. But it hasn't gone. Because if it had gone, why then do we see the things that we see every so often?
Absolutely.
Why do we see the manifestations of things that are clearly related to some of the things that we've decided and determined that we will not face?
Do you know pain never goes away?
It doesn't.
That's true.
Any time your body or an institution or even a country gets in touch with some trauma, unless you process it, it will always emerge.
It'll always be there.
It'll always be there, and it'll always emerge in some way.
It'll be mutated when it emerges.
Exactly. I wanted to say that. And it'll come back 7 times, 100 times stronger than it is, more wicked and more. So now imagine a woman who was violated and has a child. They were talking about a child who is now 15 years old. They many of them celebrated their birthdays last month. So does any Kenyan remember that?
It's something they'd rather not.
They'd rather not. Remember.
We'll avoid it. I want to jet in here because we're coming to the end of the show.
Okay.
The SEMA regional retreats happening from tomorrow to the 8th of December.
Yes.
So you've told us the Grace Agenda is part of the SEMA network.
The global, yes.
And the SEMA network, of course, was founded by the Nobel laureate, Dr. Muga.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
So we have annual retreats, and it brings the voices of all survivors, the global survivors, together. So I've participated in them twice. The other time it was more global. We had the East, the West, that means Colombia, Guatemala, and we had also the Eastern people. Not much of the North, but a lot of Africa. And so this time we decided to focus on the Africa region to come together. And this time Kenya is hosting it. So the SEMA network this time I think there's 13 countries that will be participating from Africa, but we are globally 26 countries that are members of the SEMA network.
Right.
So that means 26 countries have gone through violations. 26 leaders of these voices are the ones that come together to speak about sexual violence and amplify them. So what we're doing during this retreat, first of all, is amplifying our voices, coming together and speaking about the Red Line Initiative. The Red Line Initiative is where we draw the line. This is the extent of the end.
This is the end.
Yeah, what Ndu was talking about. That first of all, we should prevent it. And how do you prevent it? And how do you respond to it? And in future, and how do you repair it? You repair it with reparations. And reparations for sexual violence is what Grace Agenda speaks for. So the SEMA network this time will be doing collective memory. And collective memory is bringing together all the voices, the spoken or unspoken words, expressions of what the survivors have been through. So it'll be an exhibition of pictures that there have been of the women survivors. And that's what's going to be launched this year. And it's going to be on the end of this week, or that will be on the 8th. But the retreat is basically to bring our collective voices together, to build solidarity, to develop agendas also, and to come together also to speak about our experiences and to share joy, pain, and peace, and turning the pain into power.
The exhibition, where is it going to be?
It's going to be at the Alliance Francaise.
For how long?
Will be launched on the 8th, but it will be on from the 9th to the 17th of this month.
What do you hope to achieve with it?
First of all, visibility of the impact of sexual violence on a survivor, and what it's and hearing the voice. And so it is dubbed "We Are Speaking." Are you listening? And hence, what Ndu says, we speak about it so much time, and the effect and the consequence. So who is listening? When there's money and it has been taken, nobody wants to talk about it. We are still speaking, but are you listening? Really, are you listening about the impact of this? Now, we just to give a small highlight, you've talked about a perpetrator giving what they get. So the children that have been born, if perhaps one time a child, and many of them are told and they're spoken and they go through a lot of acute rejection and they're told about how they were conceived, what do you think has been planted in that child's life? If there's ever to be violence in another 15 years, we're talking about 3 years' time, those people are going to get IDs. They're 15 plus 3. If I have been planting negativity in this child, you will reap negativity. If you've been planting positivity, planting hope, planting restoration, planting peace, planting justice, it will be a very different community. And hence, we must continue to speak about it. And I must continue to go to Parliament, and I must continue to go to the Senate, and I must continue petitioning. And thank you for giving me this platform to speak about it.
You can never stop.
I can never stop.
You can never stop that. Oh, yes. 10 billion shillings. This was on record.
It was on record. The president
spoke in Parliament.
About
in an official constitutional speech.
It was given. It was item 156 and 157 of that speech.
And then it has never been operationalized to date.
No, it hasn't.
Treasury set aside 3.4 billion.
It's got to be operationalized, or at least the government need to come back and say,
absolutely,
this is the reason why this cannot happen.
So we met Aisha Jumwa earlier on this year, and she made a commitment that the government would look into it. And so we were trying to collate all the survivors, specifically of sexual violence, and what had happened around the country. And we were supposed to collate all these the numbers and the people, and actually see about getting it done through another forum. But you can do reparations, can be done in very many ways, but we want to do it through the county level. You can do it. There are very many ways to
the bottom line is
reparations. Must be done.
Jaqueline Mutere, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Jaqueline is the founder and director of the Grace Agenda. We've been having a conversation about drawing a red line to end conflict-related sexual violence. The SEMA network, SEMA regional retreat taking place from tomorrow to the 8th of December, culminating with the launch of the exhibition.
It is time. It is time.
We'll be there.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.